Hello. Good to see you again. Welcome back to another chapter of The Stars Above. I apologize for my the ending of our last video. I didn't really get to chat with y'all, but you know, the further I plunge into Icarus's character, the harder it becomes to not succumb to his unrelenting shame and remorse. Which makes it difficult sometimes for me to speak. But, you know, sometimes words don't need to be spoken. Things just need to be felt. And it's okay to feel shame and remorse. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just important that you process that in healthy ways and not direct that onto others. You know, how one goes about internalizing their trauma is entirely up to them. But one thing is for certain: you should never make your fucking bullshit anyone else's fucking bullshit. You know? You don't want to project your problems onto anyone, especially those you love. You know, that's not their burden to carry. That's your shit. That's not their shit. You know? But yeah. We are just about we are at the halfway point of the story. Not number-wise, there's 34 chapters including the prologue, but in terms of how a story is built, you know, beginning, middle, end, we are at the halfway point. I'm not exactly how story structures go, because I'm not a scholar or a man of literary education, but I know that stories are like this or something. I think this story is more of like a roller coaster, but that's okay. Either way, we are about here. Yeah, you know. So this second half is a lot of reflection. It's where a lot of the lessons, you know, really come into play. But before we get into that, a quick word from today's sponsor. Today's sponsor is the Placebo Effect. The Placebo Effect. Today's sponsor. As you can see, I am sitting in front of a fire pit, and while there is no fire in the pit, I am pretending that there is. And by pretending so powerfully in my mind, I am able to feel warmer. And I believe that's what the scientific definition of, my phone. That's what the scientific definition of the placebo effect is. Sorry, sagebush. Let me just get the audience back in the picture frame. It's very windy. Let's hope that that doesn't happen mid-chapter. Maybe we put a rock here. I think that's a little better, you know? Yeah, placebo effect. I don't know the exact scientific definition because I'm not a scientist, but I know it has something to do with pretending with all your might. And not only am I sitting by the fire pit, but I don't know if you can tell, but my socks have flames on them. So naturally, I'm warmer because my mind is playing tricks on me. I think that I am quite literally on fire. So I'm actually burning up in this jacket and by this fire. Ow. See, my feet are literally too close to the fire pit. And I'm warming up my lungs with tobacco smoke, which is basically the same as if I was sitting so close to the fire, I am inhaling fire fumes. There's so much placebo effect going on right now that I'm quite literally, it may as well be last week in the grueling sun because I am so hot from all this placebo effect. So yeah, that's today's sponsor, the scientific placebo effect. Let me just put this little rolly in my pocket. No being a litter bug. We don't want litter bugs out here. Shout out to the opposite sponsor. The fuck you sponsor goes to litter bugs. If you want to litter in like downtown LA and just further bring that place to ruin, I don't care. I don't give a fuck, you know? But don't come out here and throw your fucking Budweiser can in the bush, or I will find you. And I will do something. I will placebo effect you to the fucking moon and back with something bad. Okay. Chapter 15. Do not go gently into that strange studio. I awoke from a sleep never had to a dream unworthy of living. The blinds were just as broken. Light poured in all the same, yet everything in that wretched studio appeared gray. The taste of vomit coated my charred throat with phlegm. While grotesque, it soothed the burn of sprained vocal cords. I felt stuck in first gear, redlining as hours passed, sick and tired of being so sick and tired. Now it was really shining down, cutting the abysmal, all-encompassing gray. That light, dreadful and overbearing, of no good use to a blind man. The curtains needed to be drawn, but there weren't any. I peered to Monkey's smug face. Residual intoxication left his shifty eyes swirling about like billiard balls. They read along the lines of, "Welcome to our state of being so impossibly alone that hope becomes a slow and agonizing torture." Nothing about it was pleasing, having gladly taken any other reality. It all would have been much easier if not being real, if she hadn't been real. I awoke to a dream, and what's a dream if not another you'll eventually wake from? perhaps to another realm with the same test, furthering that self-fulfilling prophecy, succumb to the fear of being hurt, and hurt others in the process. Having known how much I'd been hurt by that fear, only to be the one who caused it, seemed inevitable. "You hear that, monkey?" I asked, laughing as a torrential downpour of dust fell from dry pipes. "I do believe that's Jim Morrison out there, a rap-tap tapping at the door. This is the end, my only friend, the end. Please put your world's smallest violin away. I don't need your symphony of sympathy. This is my own bamboozlement. You'd think by now I'd be better at not conning myself into a corner. This is what happens, monkey, when you neglect to admit just how full you are of your own shit. Don't dare say you disagree. Look into these lonely eyes. Tell me what you see. Surprise, surprise. It's all I am to be. The infinite depths of pain and misery." He didn't take kindly to my being so melodramatic, but I couldn't help it, seeing as how much easier it is than the alternative, not being such a whiny little bitch. "I waited all night, monkey," I said, "on the only open terminal of Abomination Station, for that twisted ferryman, conductor of the ghost train. What would have happened if he arrived on time? Nobody would have been here to take care of you, restock your bananas, or uncork that cheap Cabernet. 2011 was a ghastly year for wine." Depression tends to ease up on the reins when nonsense becomes equally troublesome to endure. I crawled from bed at some point in the afternoon, sorting through deep reflections I'd wished to avoid. I was still trembling from the alcohol, having stood with the help of a cane. The only issue being, it was my rational thinking cane, and not my irrational thinking cane. The latter, of course, being the more rational cane to be holding for irrational thoughts. I misplaced it the night before in a fit of hysteria. This room somehow larger, grayer, and more confusing. "This just won't do," I said. "What would happen, monkey, if I suddenly began thinking rationally? While I'd surely go less stir-crazy, may the madness keep my sanity at bay." Pacing back and forth, I thumped the rational cane with each step. You can tell a lot about a man and how he thinks in the way he walks, just as you can tell a lot about the horrors of a man's life in the humbling moments considered precious, like not dying to a fucking train. I'm rather good at pacing to and fro, but I'm even better at going in circles. This presenting another issue. There was simply no space to do so. "How can I think if I can't walk, monkey?" I asked. "How can I walk if I can't leave? And how can I leave if I'm keeping me here?" I changed the subject. How might I lend greater understanding to this dilemma of sharing and dance with my shadow? A difficult waltz to master, an easier one to elude. The room was quiet as a mouse, yet I could hear Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds, murder ballads blaring, a horrendous album choice for this kind of depraved mood. How can the lack of sound be so fucking loud? It's impossible to concentrate with all this noise, I yelled, perhaps not wishing to hear what I had to think. "For you don't wish to hear what you have to think," I'd echo, cutting myself off. "I need something, monkey," I'd plea, to rid me of this edge peered much too far over. "What of a swig?" "No, the drink is what got me into this mess." I opened my tin case of drugs, fingering around. "Mushrooms, then. A cap and stem. Clear my mind of all this phlegm." No, wrong doors opened. Icky skeletons to face. I peered to the now very offensive orange bottle. "The Xanax. Drift off peacefully." No, I may never wake. Yet would that be so bad? I picked up the powdered rock, examining it like a precious gemstone. The break glass in case of emergency cocaine. Just a snoot, two to boot. No, I'll begin to think far too rationally. It's all much too sensible already. Left to one's own devices, sobriety it was, a healthy alternative. Foreboding music played in the background of a dramatic scene. A janky and deranged man in shambles, on the brink of a severe episode, treads tediously in deep observation. He ponders over the theory of relativity, He once spent the eternities of a single second looking into her eyes, yet somehow, now those infinite spans spent in her arms seemed no more than fleeting minutes. The cruelty of it all, he says. How could such expansive moments suddenly contract? He cackles, further unhinged. Eureka! I've got it, monkey. It's all become so incredibly clear. Love is just an expressive art of meticulously calculated self-destruction. He says this in half jest, not believing enough people are aware of that twisted fact. Earlier in the week, Celine had mentioned that she'd always wished for someone to write her a bio, curious to know how others saw her. Amidst a brief, manic bout which clouded my truly disturbed ideas of self-preservation, it seemed an opportune time to do just that. I'd never before ventured to write a poem, yet now, aside flickering candles and trickles of water echoing from my bathroom and into the dark crevices of mind, where an organ in an old church was faintly heard playing Bach's Toccata and Fugue in D minor by a Gothic warlock draped in a black robe whom had cigarettes for fingers and bourbon for blood, I'd channel my inner Poe. Thump, thump, thump with the cane. Love flows through ink at the tip of my pen. I write her name in frantic strokes and scratch it out again. To please my sight, she deserves more. I'm not ready. Not quite right. Yes, monkey, I said, pain for a poem. For what is a beautiful poem, if not for pain itself? So, I'd continue. There exists many tales for creatures of night, ghosts and ghouls uncaught with one sight, goblins and trolls causing a fright, those in between seeking souls' sweet delight. Seldom we speak of they who don't bite, outshining bright beneath the moonlight, wandering spirits who internally fight, out-seeking self with flickers of might. There exist many tales for creatures of night, though this tale I shall write. It lived on a hill, restless of will, upon a horizon of which it would die in. In an old oak tree, it dreamt to be free, free of a free of a world that torn it apart, free of a world doomed from its start. Long ago croaked that soft-spoken old oak. Inside dwelled its creatures, who acted as teachers, not the kind found under your bed, but the likes of which only seen in one's head, dead and decrepit, terrifyingly wretched, some dark and some light who'd rise in the night. They were its own, and with them it was home. It spent its days lost in a haze, traversing the mind like some twisted maze. In its soul lie a hole much darker than coal, empty and hollow, leaving nothing to follow. In its heart rests a knife slowly taking its life. Steady dripping of blood flood into the mud, down to the soil where it would boil, feeding the oak with all its turmoil. The oak had one branch which rested a noose that it had always kept loose, tethered rope to relieve it of hope, spun from the vine that lie on its shrine. The sun cast its shadow to which it would know, soon, here, its life it would throw, when the time came to make its depart from a world never held dear to its heart. The world gave it nothing, yet always took something. It gave her joy and was broke like a toy. It gave her love, flown off like a dove. Its generosity gave way to ferocity. But it refused giving in to this world full of shit, eating us whole, bit by small bit. It saw through those lies in each hollow eye, having dealt with the pain of all its wrapped chain. It faced down each demon in search of the freeman, and sniffed out the dark like blood to a shark. While the creature was stripped of its love, joy, and hope, never rose the day it resisted to cope. One thing was clear, it never showed fear. Forever it knew in its soul to be true. The rise of the sun on the morrow came new. A strive to survive, perhaps wake alive, good fortunes to see, it may finally be free, to touch that first light, which follows each night. I burnt the edge of each page, crumpling it up until weathered. Blackening the parchment, I smothered it in the ash of Palo Santo and rolled it into a scroll, bound by chain to a miniature locket. While beautiful, it was a shame to have come from a heavy heart at the hands of misery. There were 2 more days before the next work shift. 48 hours of radio silence spent behind closed doors, left to the paranoia of my own accord. Unsure of what to say, do, or how to even begin apologizing. It was tormenting to revisit that moment I walked away, having looped it endlessly, wishing to take it all back. Regret consumed me as I ate, drank, slept, pissed, and shit each thought of what I could have, would have, or should have done to prevent it. Emerging from the torturous comfort of my dwelling was like Plato's allegory of the cave, having been fearful of what lay beyond it. It was much safer inside, imprisoned within fragments of reality, bound to the shackles of my undoing. For to step over that threshold meant having to face myself in the eyes of another, while confronting what felt to be irreparable. Celine wasn't on the schedule with me, but Thea was, being equally daunting to a boy grieving his mother's disappointment. I'd walk with my head to the floor and tail between my legs, like a dog who'd known he shit where he slept, finding any reason to brush past her in hopes of initiating conversation, to which she'd simply smile, still testing the will of men. Thea, I finally spoke, whimpering behind her. I'm so sorry. For what? She asked, chuckling. For hurting Bird, storming off like that, for all of it. I reckon you don't have anything to be sorry about, kiddo. Thea wore a cunning smile as if understanding why it happened. Is she okay? I asked. Are you okay? She questioned. No. Then it sounds like you already know the answer. I feel terrible. What can I do to make this right? This was bound to happen one way or another. So, the question's not, what can I do to make this right? It's, what can I do to understand why? What are you too scared of? What is it you're choosing to turn your back on? Start by asking those questions, because I'd wager there ain't much else you can do other than forgive yourself. That's the hardest bit of it. Such is the course love takes, you know? And there's always a toll to pay. You seem to have kick-started the whole shebang, never having bothered with the meat and potatoes, hopping right into the tough stuff. Strap yourself in, babes. This ride's only just begun, and about to get a whole lot bumpier. Just what is it that you feel happened? Because one minute I was sure you two were going to get to bumping uglies, and the next you were gone. The way you two danced, how you looked into each other's eyes, as if no one else in the world existed. You were damn near inescapable to the ogling gaze of every lonely soul in that joint. I've never seen two people more entranced than in sync with the other. I thought that damn club was about to witness the most passionate love made since the lustful days of ancient Babylon. I don't know how to explain it, I said. She kept pulling away, and each time it felt like she was taking something of mine with her, a piece of me. Like plucking sorrows to the surface? She asked with a grin. You need to let go, Irk. I've felt a whole lot of pain, but not like this. Nothing like this. What I did, how it must have made her feel. I gave her a reason to believe I could hurt her, that I could walk away from her without a second thought. How do you come back from that? I wanted to die. I begged to die. Thea took me in her arms. At some point or another, kiddo, we tend to hurt the ones we love most in the world, she said, letting go to look me in the eyes. It's both complicated and equally simple as this. A heart must break for love to be found. You've triggered one another, releasing those issues to present themselves. You've each lived through immense suffering to find yourselves here, two birds of the same feather, growing together. Now you must both allow the divinity of your healing process to begin. Thea would continue reminding me of this lesson, having always spoken with the conviction of experience. Her wisdom stemmed from an understanding that resided in the depths of her own broken heart, one she'd spent a lifetime mending. Just as I, Thea carried something of great power she'd been working to heal, an opportunity of righting a wrong, one found tried and true. And while it remained a mystery, its secrets would be revealed in time. I work with Bird tomorrow, Thea said. I'll talk to her. Let her know that you're doing okay and not in total shambles. We wouldn't want that. You're needed strong. Thank you, dearest, I said. Can you please give her this for me? It was the scroll and an apology letter detailing what followed that night, down to my time spent on the train tracks. In hindsight, that part probably shouldn't have been included. Her sense of abandonment was already triggered, having walked away like everyone else in her life. But the selfishness in that decision apparently wasn't enough. So, I left her believing she may become the reason I'd go as far as killing myself. My pitiful lack of awareness was downright astounding. It was another week before Celine and I were scheduled together, having been a sad day of catching each other's gaze, only to dart our attention out from the line of fire. My mental disarray causing terrible incoherence towards customers. "Can find something you for?" I'd ask. "Particularly looking? Hats tall and small, beaded tassels anytime, jean shorts, jorts for short." A sweet couple would walk off muttering, "The fuck's wrong with that guy?" "Oh, honey, be nice. Didn't you see his drooping eye? Poor guy must be a stroke victim." The mere thought of approaching Celine left me feeling spun out. It wasn't like walking over eggshells, but traversing a flowery field of landmines. After an eternity of trying to recite an ill-prepared speech in my head, the courage was gathered to misrelate it entirely. "Did you like your poem?" I asked, quivering. "Yeah," she replied, "but it doesn't excuse what you did that night." "I know. I'm so sorry, Bird. I don't know how else to say it. What came out of you at the club is a darkness you've been hiding. There's something inside of you, Icarus, something you aren't confronting, and you unleashed it on me." Celine was right, and I'd been too ashamed, arrogant, and fearful to admit it. "I've never had much going for me," I said softly, "but you've been the best thing to ever happen, and like everything else, I fucked it all up. I don't think I know how to act like a real person, and you deserve better than whatever it is I am. I'm so sorry, Bird. I'll back off." How I perceived myself in that moment is unclear, but as a wiser man, I now see a child throwing a guilt trip, a bitch-made kid attempting to weasel away from confrontation with himself in hopes of being pitied. Anytime I'd ever felt to lose something, I ran for the goddamn hills, but barricades were being put up for no reason whatsoever, not having lost anything at all. Celine was still right there, trying her very best to help a blind man see. "Irk," she'd exhaust, "stop being so dramatic. I don't need you to back off. I need you to get it together. Why can't you just be my friend?" "It's hard," I said, circling a rack with my head down. "Why? Just talk to me." "Because," I'd whimper in hesitation, "I love you." That was the first time I spoke those sacred words aloud to Celine, from behind the same clothing rack where her voice called out to me the day we met. I spoke those words of which are taken all too lightly, all too often, with shameful eyes to the floor, annoyance in my heart, and through a barely audible tone. Like a true romantic, it was perfectly disgraceful. She'd pretend not to hear such a lame attempt. "Speak up, Irk," she said. "I said I love you, okay?" I yelled, oblivious to volume. Celine's head spun quicker than her body could follow, nearly twisting off as she looked around for who may have heard. "Nice shirt, Irk," she said, chuckling. I only had a vest on. We still weren't taking ourselves too seriously, which was good, but we avoided the subject further. I'd made a terrible mistake, there's no doubt about it, but if I could bend time and alter that event, not a thing would be changed. It took some time to understand, but Celine never severed our connection that destined night at the club. What she did was rip masks from the face concealing a monster, having revealed he who was afraid of himself. Masks of which I'd spent my whole childhood fortifying in hopes of protection, bound to that boy by fear, neglect, and abuse. And upon those tracks, their shattered remnants were laid as the man once behind them began to bleed out, having taken me back to the very moment they were formed. Wah wah wee wah. Looks like we're getting into the juicy stuff. Yeah, we got juiciness ahead. I hope you enjoyed that chapter. I'm glad that we could take it a little more lighthearted than the last one. Hearing Icarus with Monkey always gives me a little bit of a chuckle, you know. those guys sure are silly in each other's presence, you know. I'm glad they can make light of situations that are tremendously difficult. That's good. So, once more, thank you so much for joining me on this beautifully cold day. I'm so glad that we could sit by this fire and warm up. I'm sure it's much cozier wherever you are watching this from, you know, but I had a swell time and I cannot wait until the next one. Come on back for another chapter of The Stars Above.